The Working Group of Experts on People of African Descent sends you its compliments and expresses its sincere gratitude to Phenomenal Women Global for according it an opportunity to participate in this conference. We commend you for your contribution to the noble cause of eliminating discrimination against women, especially women of African descent. The Working Group of Experts on People of African Descent is a special procedure of the Human Rights Council that studies the human rights situation of people of African descent and makes recommendations to stakeholders, including states. We conduct country visits to states with the cooperation of governments, hold consultative public sessions with all stakeholders, and engage with states and concerned persons directly on human rights violations in our communication procedures. We are pleased to note that this year we conducted a country visit to Switzerland, and our report will be presented at the 51st session of the Human Rights Council in the coming month. It is important to always remember that the rights of women of African descent are human rights, and the human rights are also rights of women of African descent. However, racism and racial discrimination are very strong forces that exclude women of African descent from the realization of rights globally. In our operational guidelines for the inclusion of people of African descent in Agenda 2030, the working group notes with concern that women of African descent experience further human rights concerns at the intersection of gender, race, and other identities such as religion. This intersectional discrimination increases the vulnerability of women of African descent to poverty due to limited social and economic mobility, including constrained access to the labor market, inadequate housing, particular health risks such as race-based traumatic stress that exposes them to chronic illnesses such as hypertension and heart diseases. The education system is marred by stereotypical diversions of people of African descent to vocational fields. Females of African descent are encouraged by educators to patronize specific areas other than being supported to maximize their potential. Lack of recognition and accreditation of qualifications from Africa negates the knowledge and skills of African migrants. Women of African descent constitute the largest number of persons that rise up very early to clean Europe and the rest of the Western world and work very late after hours, leaving their little children at their own devices. Female asylum seekers of African descent are equally stranded in camps in Switzerland for several years in states of precariousness and inadequate conditions. In our preliminary findings to Switzerland, we note that the lack of concern for diseases that affect women of African descent, including fibroids, lead to misdiagnoses, inadequate and sometimes inappropriate health care. Women of African descent are said to receive less care during labor because of the misconception or stereotypes that they are meant for childbirth, they endure more pain, and they exaggerate pain. Bodies of women of African descent are hypersexualized. They are portrayed as ready for sexual activity other than other productive and innovative work. This creates an imagery of black females as intended for the pleasure of others other than partners in competitive fields that yield greater advantage for society. We recommend that reparations for legacies of the past, including slavery, colonialism, and racial segregation, should include tax credits for households headed by females of African descent. A system of accreditation and recognition of qualifications from other parts of the world, including Africa, is essential to open possibilities or access to the labor market for all persons of African descent. Government housing policy should embody equity considerations that mitigate market forces that perpetuate discrimination against people of African descent in housing. We also recommend diversification of the health sector provisions to cater for the peculiarities in the population. Complaint mechanisms against racism and racial discrimination need to be diversified in order to be accessible to victims with effective control on reprisals. I thank you for your kind attention and wish you a fruitful conference.